Embers of Hope by Nyan Sangetsu, Chapter 14. You've changed things. All my life, I wanted people to look up to me. I wanted a family, fame, adulation. But what was I? Really? What am I? Really? I'm no hero, but maybe, for once in my lousy life, I can stop thinking about who I want to be and who I hate. I can finally stop being scared I'm not good enough, because I'm not a hero, but if I try long enough and hard enough, I can make a difference in this world. That's my dream, you see. You've changed things. So what's it feel like? Yang, no, bad Yang, sit in the corner. Come on, Ruby, don't be such a spoiled sport. Ruby was content to be exactly that, in that she refused to be goaded away from the task at hand. She'd only just finished modifying Crescent Rose, because nobody expected her baby to have a third form, and blast it, she needed to focus on this, because if she didn't, this was going to blow up in her face. Literally, those crystals were volatile things at the best of times, and this latest tune-up proved to be rather explosive, to say the least. Whether that would be for her or her enemies remained to be seen. The former seemed to be more and more likely, with Yang hovering over her shoulder. Throw me a bone here. A hand pinched her cheek. It's just one question, just the one, and then I'll be out of your hair. It's a personal question. Her cheeks puffed out in thinly veiled irritation as she considered her disembowelment creation, disassembled creation on the bench before her. Go jump in a pool yourself if you want to see it. If you want to see how it feels. Yang pulled a face. You pulled a face. See, you say that, but I'm not really sure I want to go to do that. Silver orbs pulsed red. The whites of her eyes bleed black as irritation got the better of her. These days, the change was nearly instantaneous. Her skin became pallid as veins pulsed in her face and exposed arms. Her once vibrant hair turned a stark shade of startling white. Ugh, you sound like Dad. A tendril of inky darkness burst from the Reaper's back and wheeled the chair around, allowing her to look her nagging sister in the eye. Yang didn't bat an eyelash at it, if only because she'd seen this trick a time or two. Of course not. This was Yang. She wasn't afraid of anything. Yang was her sister. Yang was invincible. Fine. Ruby gave in. It feels good. Really good. But the like eyes lit up until a finger stabbed her in the nose. It's not all sunshine and daisies. You've got to practice. You've got to practice it. Control it. Otherwise, it controls you. Remember how much of a hard time Winter had? And you? Ruby grimaced at that. Sure, sis. Remind me of all the trauma I went through. Not like it hurt or anything. Ruby suffered the worst of it at first, if only because she'd been so young at the time. As such, it had taken her the longest to master the change. She'd only just gained full control of it last year. Now there was no one faster than her. She could shift in a blink and back again, commune with the grim, carry great burden, and, well, all sorts of things, to say nothing of her more esoteric abilities. Look, she pinched the brow of her nose. I'm not saying you should try it or anything, but it's for keeps. Once you do, there's no going back. Her hands wands a bit as she tried to explain. It's not a half mind of anything like that. But you became part of something greater, something more than yourself. Mom won't like the sound of that. Don't care. The world was changing. It wasn't hard to see why or where. Ruby knew the reason as much as anyone else. She played a part in it after all. It had begun when Salem had taken Naruto in. So many baby pictures, much adorables. But she didn't think it would end with them either. They changed things. Naruto first, then her, then Winter, and then the dominoes started to fall. Once they did, that was the end of it. Nothing would be the same, and maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Yeah, well, you still want to be a huntress, right? Ruby wrinkled her nose at the question. There was a silence. Right? I don't know. Ruby spun in her chair once, completing a single revolution before coming to a stop. Mom was one, and for the longest time I wanted to be just like her, but yeah, I get you. Yang reached down and tousled her hair. She's different now. Not bad different, just different. It's the stress. God, and she didn't want to think about this. Why couldn't things just be normal? She cast about for a change. She cast about for a change for perspective instead. Well, how do you feel about it? How did she feel? Yang pursed her lips at the sudden challenge. She had other thoughts on that. The thoughts best not spoken. So what if Auntie Summer didn't like the current state of things? She could get bent. This was their life now. Nothing could change that. Their family dynamic had been forever altered by events beyond their control, and nobody could change that, no matter what Summer might think. But Mom, Raven, she understood the pecking order. Sure, if anyone had a legitimate reason to worry, she'd hear them out, but her aunt was jumping at shadows, throwing around crazy claims. She'd never quite accepted the way things were, even after Salem's little talk. To her, good was good and evil was, well, evil, black and white, darkness and light. In her mind, there could be no in-between. If that meant shunning people, then so be it. Summer wasn't her mom, Raven was. Maybe if things had been different, if Mom had left, she might have been more dependent on Auntie. But now, wisely, she decided not to voice those thoughts. It wouldn't do to hurt her adorable little sister after all. I think your mom just needs to chill. She changed gears quickly. So, does he ever run out of energy? Yang! We're not like that. Oh ho! This was prime teasing material. Do go on. Well, he's not here right now, Ruby barreled on. He said something about taking a look at Beacon with Wise, but last I checked, he could make at least 9, and really, you can use all this stamina for all sorts of things. Uh-oh. Ruby's pale face turned blood red as she realized she'd been caught out saying something she shouldn't. Her mouth worked wordlessly for 3 seconds. 6, 9, now. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue, sis? Yang leered him. Or should maybe not a cat, but a certain fox? Yang, stop it! Ruby howled as she gave her arm a hard thump. I'll kick your butt. She grabbed her sister and pulled her close. Promises, sis. No matter what, she wouldn't be left behind, she swore. Meanwhile, others were having thoughts of their own. I can't believe you've done this. Ren was furious. Of course he was. Nora didn't know why she'd expected any different. You had to really know him as she did to truly see it. It was there in the stiffness in his spine, the way those pink eyes narrowed upon her as they took in her new form, the shock, even disgust as he beheld what she'd become. He stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall of his room, then tried to keep going, almost as if he were trying to get away from her. That hurt more than she cared to admit. Poor Rennie. He didn't understand. There had been a small, tiny part of herself that wanted to believe that he would see this as what it was, not a curse, but a blessing. They had been together, but not together, for so long now. He was her best friend, and she liked to think that she was his, that he would see and understand as a good friend should. But once again, Rennie did not understand. Ren, listen. She tried to approach him, only to flinch as he recalled. It's still me. I'm still me. How can I be sure? He slapped her hand away when she made a second attempt. How do I know they haven't changed you too? Nora's heart ran a gamut of emotions, a garnet of emotions, and as she stared her partner down, No. He couldn't be like this. He had to understand. He just had to. Summer's paranoia was infectious. It seemed if she'd known he would react this way, she might have never tried this in the first place. But it was too late for second thoughts. There could be no coming back not from this. She wished Naruto was here. He could help. He would make Rennie understand, but he wouldn't return until tomorrow. This was her trial to face, and she hated every bit of it. This isn't you, Nora. Something snapped. It was her heart. Yes, it is. She rounded on him with a snarl, voice rising in a sharp contralto as she all but pinned him to the wall with her right hand. This has always been me. You just refuse to accept it. I'm not normal. I'll never be normal. Be strong and hit stuff. A pale finger stabbed into his chest, jabbing with each word. That's what I'm good at, what I do, and if you can't accept that, then what? Her best friend stepped to her with a frown. You'll kill me? Is that what he told you to do? Ready? No. Her hands flew to her mouth. I would never do that to you. Despite her best efforts, her voice warbled. You know I wouldn't do that, right? No, Nora. His gaze hardened. I'm starting to think I never knew you at all. He looked away. He's corrupted you. Those pink eyes swung back to her, meeting her red. Changed you into something you weren't. A low growl built in the back of her throat. Nora stamped it down before she could vocalize her anger. He was wrong. Wrong. Naruto hadn't changed her at all. He'd simply set her free. He had helped her to understand life was chaos. There was no purpose and order, so why not live that life while you could and make the most of it? What was so wrong with that? But Rennie was still speaking, and she was horrified to catch the tail end of their conversation. I think maybe it's best if I leave this place. You can't. She grabbed at his sleeve, holding him fast. And you're going to stop me? Everything was wrong, all wrong, every bit of it. Eyes burned, stinging with tears. She wanted to scream, to storm off with a snarl, but she couldn't, for you see, she needed him to understand. It was a burning need, one she couldn't ignore, so she did what any true friend would do. A real friend would make their friend understand, but Rennie wasn't acting like a friend. She couldn't stand it, so she headbutted Rennie hard. Nora! He collapsed with a gasp, too startled to even react. Perhaps that was the best. She couldn't bear to look at him right now. Why couldn't he see? Why couldn't he understand? He wasn't giving her any of them a chance. None of them. Nora considered him for a long, painful moment, agonizing over the choice she knew she had to make. Maybe I should just throw him in one of those stupid pools and be done with it. But he would hate her for that. She knew it. He knew it. They both did. She buried her head into her hands and made her decision. Ilya regarded the pool with something akin a whimper. Dark depths called to her, promising power, speed, and certainty if she could be endure. She just had to step forward, and the temptation was there. But also fear, so much fear. It riveted her where she stood, paralyzed her, all but held her in its thrall, and so she stood still as a statue, gazing at her reflection in the darkness. She could understand why Sienna had volunteered her for this after Trifa refused. Her fellow Faunes had taken one look at this thing and noped right the hell out like any sane woman would. All well and good, of course, but now it fell to her. No one else wanted to try their luck, but someone had to do it. Such were Sienna's orders. This was the test. This was for the White Fang. This was for Blake. It certainly didn't help that Belladonna was standing right there, watching her every move. Blake, the girl she'd loved for as long as she could remember. Blake, who had vanished as a child, only to return as this gorgeous creature, a predator who walked with purpose and poise in her step. Blake, who had come home promising power and prestige and equality to any Faunus who joined them. Ilya had all but pounced on the opportunity. She'd followed her all the way from Menagerie, only to find that Sienna was already here, and then came the order. Was this the power they were promised? She had been forewarned of what would happen should she fail. Death awaited her if she wasn't strong enough. She didn't feel strong right now. She felt weak, afraid, so very afraid. She didn't want to die, not when she had only just begun to live again. There was still so much she wanted to see, needed to say, longed to do, and if this went poorly for her, everything was over. Are you sure about this? She nudged a stray pebble into the pool, then winced as it dissolved. It seems a bit extreme. That's fair, her friend allowed. I've not tried it yet myself. You haven't? I'm undecided. Blake folded both arms beneath her breast. Ilya tried her best not to look. Really, she did, as she considered the inky waters below. But what about you, Ilya? Those lovely golden eyes turned on her, wide and imploring. This needs to be done. What would it take to convince you? What, indeed? She could think of so many things. Ilya's face flamed, and for once she faltered. How about? Her tongue failed her. If she might die doing this, then she didn't want to go without regrets. Best to perish with a clear conscience and a sound mind. Backing out was no longer an option. Sienna would have her hide, if not her head, for making the Fang look like fools. To say nothing of the shame she'd feel for being branded a coward, and so she plucked up the tattered remnants of her courage, marshaled her spirit, and spoke. She whispered the words on a thread of breath. "Oh!" Blake looked at her then. Really looked at her. "I didn't realize you felt that way." A wave of self-loathing dragged Ilya down and threatened to drown her in despair. Blast it, she'd gone and buggered everything up again, just as she had back then. Of course she wouldn't look at her that way. Why would she, when she was surrounded by all these people? So many friends who were themselves so much better than her. It was just too cruel. "Ilya, yes." She stood ramrod straight. A hand came up under her chin. "If that's what it takes." "Wait." Blake leaned in and kissed her softly, sweetly, lips plying against her own to stifle all protest. It was a soft kiss, all things considered, not fierce or hungry, but calm and sure. Ilya stiffened in turn. Paranoia reared its ugly head, half expecting a trick, that she would be shoved into the pool while she was distracted. No such event transpired. Instead, she found herself melted into her, all her fears and doubts fading away like much morning mist. Her hands moved, tentatively linking around the taller girl's waist, then tighter when she didn't pull away. When she finally did, Ilya couldn't bring herself to speak. "Are you convinced now?" "Bah." Everything was spinning, all her world a blurry haze. Why, all right, breathing. She needed to do that. Her heart did a silly little flip in her chest. Blake had chosen her, not Adam. Never Adam. She would not betray her trust. She'd sooner die. The gentle reminder gave her the strength she needed to endure. Yes, that made things quite a bit easier for her, didn't it? Ilya all but vaulted into the pool of darkness. "Geronimo!" "Harder!" A gasp filled the bedroom, peaked into a moan. "Do you have any idea at all how wrong that sounds?" "Don't care." Weiss laid back down and buried her head into a pillow to stifle a second moan. "Too much stress this week. Make me feel like jelly." "All right." Naruto cracked his knuckles. "But remember, you wanted this. Don't go complaining to me if you're walking funny after." His thumb and forefinger came down on the bare expanse of her shoulders, followed by the rest. Then he went to work. Weiss bucked despite herself, unable to muffle a third cry in time. Say what you would about Naruto and his interesting morals, but he really knew how to give a godly massage. Chakra wasn't just good for easing the kinks out of one's body, it just felt wonderful. "Stop that. I can't help it. What would you have me do?" "Talk." She looked back to see a hand clamped over his face. "Anything but that." "All right." She flung his own warning back at him. "But you asked for this." His look of surprise was almost comical. They've all lost their minds." The dam burst as she flopped down on the pillows. "Have they now?" "They have." She smashed her head into the pillow again, this time from frustration. "Every single one of them." There. He patted her shoulders. "Let it all out." "What do you think I'm doing?" She huffed. "Really, with the amount of people pining after you, you're either being deliberately dense," she gasped anew as her back arched, "or you're just thick as a brick. Really, I'm not sure which is worse. How do you do it?" She all but heard him blink. "Do what?" "Denser than a black hole." Her legs kicked out against the bed for leverage as she propped herself up on the points of her elbows. "Let's see here." From there, she raised both hands and began to count them off like clockwork. "We have myself, Winter, Yang, Ruby, Cinder, and now Nora. To say nothing of Sienna." "Nope." His hands still against her back. "Not a chance. She's a friend." "Good." The barest beginnings of a smile touched her lips. I'd be genuinely concerned if the entire tower was pining after you." "Come on, that's a bit much, ain't it?" "You're hardly the only primer here." Her smile has him frowning. "Mercury has eyes for Emerald. Who wants Cinder?" who seem to have staked a claim on you. Then we have the conundrum that is Coco Adele. Lower, she hissed as he found a particular nasty knot on her lower back. To say nothing of Blake and Ilya. His hands paused for a moment, then renewed their ministrations. Did they finally stop tiptoeing around that? Good for them. Aha! She jabbed a finger at him, failed, and settled for stabbing the pillow instead. You aren't blind after all, he winced. You say that, but Winter and I saw your potential first. It's only natural we have a claim on you, to say nothing of. And quite suddenly it was her turn to wince. Willow hasn't. The face he pulled gave her more relief than 1,000 dust crystals. She's not done anything. Thank the gods. Her face met the pillow with renewed fervor. That's my mother. That's my mother. I can't even begin to describe how awkward that would be. Set her up with Tyrion or something. Naruto choked but recovered quickly. You know, you could give the pools a try yourself. You might like it. No, thank you. She crossed both arms beneath her chest and refused to look at him. I'm still coming to grips with motherhood thanks to a certain someone. The last thing I need are my emotions running rampant while doing it. Huh, sorry. He had the good grace to blanch at least as he needed her back. Venom's been good, right? There, son, preened in her head. Better than ever. He's been on his best behavior, Weiss confirmed with a subtle smile, although an ice blue iris peered over her shoulder as his hands renewed their ministrations. If you keep that up, I won't be held responsible for what happens next. A blonde brow quirked. That a challenge? Maybe it is. She let her eyes go lidded, only to frown as he took his hands away. There you go again. His words cooled her fever. You tease and flirt with the best of them, but when it comes down to it, you back away. Don't think we haven't noticed. Sorry, he averted his gaze. I don't want to break anyone's heart, or promise something I can't give, you know? You may have to. A touch of sympathy shone through her smile. That's life. And you're sure it won't be your heart I break? Certainly not. She tossed her head, pulling the white curtain of her hair aside for him once more. You broke me, after all. Turned me from a prim and proper schnee into this. His hands twitched against her hips as she looked up at him through her lashes. I'll have you take responsibility, good sir. Also, she broke the spell a moment longer. You owe me child support, he snorted. Did you just make a joke? Her smile was decidedly coy. Why, I haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. Their shared laughter echoed long and loud off the walls of the yacht, and thank Salem for soundproofing. Weiss reveled in it. There were times such as these when she wondered about it all, what might have transpired had their paths never crossed, who she might have become without him. But that was impossible now, and she couldn't imagine a life without his madness, and blast it, if she was to share him with others, then she would make a lasting impression. She would be first. Speaking of support, she cooed. I didn't say stop. His hands trailed a touch lower. Paused. You sure you're sore down there? Quite. Very sore. She deliberately turned her back and was rewarded for her trust. Gently at first, then with increasingly boldness, he began to stroke her hips, followed by her flank. Knots unfurled beneath firm fingers, and she felt a pleasant willingness accompanying her existence. She hadn't misled him in the least. After such a hectic week, she was quite sore. Among other things, sure enough, her body began to respond to him, warming to his touch as he went about his work. Naruto didn't abuse the opportunity she'd given him. If anything, he was a perfect gentleman about it, which was precisely the problem. She shifted her hips against him and scooted a little longer, but he didn't do a thing untoward. Blast it! She wanted him to touch her like that, to drive her mad, and he did, in a sense, not in the way she would have liked. Rather than take the hint and give her what she wanted, he held back, though she suspected he wasn't aware of it. He took her to the edge and kept her there, dangling her just short of pleasant release, and it did feel good, better than good really. It was absolutely fantastic. A slow and pleasant heat began to pool in her stomach. Despite her best attempts to ignore it, her knees shifted and twisted, rubbing against one another where they lay. Did he know what he was doing to her? He had to. The clever bastard. The heat was building in her, coiling just below her breast like some fiery serpent. Sure, you're not uncomfortable. Gibberish fled from her lips. Weiss writhed now, biting her knuckles in a vain attempt to muffle the sounds her mouth was making. Her body had long since betrayed her and refused to obey her commands. She could scarcely speak, let alone think, while he worked his magic to escape her when he squeezed her rear fingers, digging deep into the stress tissue. "Magnificent bastard!" She gasped. Sassy Schnee came in the immediate rejoinder. White light built beneath her eyes. She definitely knew what he was doing. He must. If he didn't, she was going to stick him full of holes with Mertenaster. Words were one thing, but she wanted to prove it to herself as much as him. Make wholly sure this wasn't some childish crush, and it wasn't. As she grit her teeth and wrote out the pleasant shocks coursing through her body, a pleasant haze fell over her thoughts until that haze enveloped her world, and her body was nearly mad with desire. Abruptly, he stopped. Weiss wanted to howl. Instead, she moved. None of that. She twisted her hips to face him, uncaring of her state of undress. "Listen." Her hands came out to cup his cheeks, up but squishing his face between them. "You're a wonderful person, and you deserve to be loved." With that said, she leaned forth and pressed her forehead to his. "You are loved. Remember that. So stop." She flicked his forehead, holding back. "Do I make myself clear? I'm not exactly a saint, Weiss." "Surely not." She snarled at that, startling him terribly. "I didn't fall in love with a saint. I fell in love with you. The boy who taught me that it was all right to be me. The one who pried me away from Jackish Snee, took me out of that pit I'd fallen into, and gave me this strange, wonderful new life." A pause, a moment to let the words sink in for maximum effect. "That's why I love you. It's why I will continue to love you, no matter what you say or do." Naruto's jaw clicked open, mouth parted in surprise. She leaned back and smirked, resplendent in her triumph. "Blood enough for you?" When he didn't immediately reply, Weiss did so for him. She turned and smothered his reply with her lips. "Previews? Are we having a beach episode? Seriously? And she's paying for it? Yes! Weiss is best girl. Really breaking the fourth wall there, Ruby." "Be prepared." Winter and Cinder turned a glower on Weiss. The younger Schnee preened. "All's fair in love and war." Naruto flung up his arms and stretched in the sun. "Now this is more like it." Grim children walked among normal people. Ospen stifled a sigh. "Why did we think this was a good idea again? Come now, my love. I'm sure they can control themselves." A distant explosion of water said otherwise. "Well," she amended, "for the most part." End of chapter 14.